Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening.
Good morning, everybody. Go to strengthguild.com, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to the Iron Radio collections, and we've got new shirts and new banners for you to support the show. Everything from just a regular banner, regular shirt, to ones with sayings on them, like Lonnie's Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree shirt. And some news for you, we're going to have some contests for people who own these shirts and things. So if you support the show, we'll let you more on that later. So if you get in on these early, you can be one of the first people to win some prizes. So thank you very much. Go check out the site, strengthguild.com. Scroll down to Iron Radio Collections and support the show.
Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I'm a sports nutrition professor of about 20 years, and I'm a former competitive bodybuilder.
This is Phil Stevens. I run Strength Guild, I'm a powerlifter, Highland Games athlete, and I'm back from vacation. So.
Right on.
Hi, Dr. Mike T. Nelson, Associate Professor of the Kerrig Institute, creator of the Flex Diet Cert, and still in Minnesota.
Still in Minnesota.
Yep. It's, not bad. It was 11 above this morning. Not windy, so walk wasn't too bad.
Oh, yeah. See, you're much colder than even we are here in Ohio. All right, folks, we are going to talk after the break about top 3, let's say, must-see locations for 2021 once things start to normalize, I guess, vaccinations and everything else. So this could be a permanent, brick-and-mortar location that we really think you might want to see. Maybe it's an event that really will help inform you, about the landscape of muscle and strength gains and sports and that sort of thing. First, just a little bit of news here. One is the traditional nutrition science thing. The other is completely different. Mike and I were discussing a couple of things in the past 2 weeks, and I had made some comments about modern day bodybuilding, and we were talking about all the different categories now. There's classic physique and 212 at the Olympia, and with amateurs there's classic, and if you look at the women's categories, gosh, there's just so many. Figure, bikini, fitness, wellness. Yeah, and I'm thinking now, again, not being right up to the minute on this stuff, how does one compete in wellness? But okay, So anyway, I had made some comments about it, and Lee Haney just came out and made some comments about modern day bodybuilding, and I thought we could sort of compare and contrast what he was saying versus what Mike and I were discussing. But first, let's get the science news out of the way here.
Strength and muscle sport news.
This is about stevia. So if you're like me, you do use stevia occasionally. It's been a long time since I've made a wholesale switch away from the blue stuff, from Equal. Not that it's necessarily horrific in any way, but, I just don't like overexposure to any one thing. So I kind of went to sucralose, right, Splenda, and then stevia is my most recent thing, just the past maybe 2 years or so, 3 years. So this says, natural sugar alternative stevia may cause gut bacteria imbalances. This is written by Annie Lennon through labroots.com. And she got it, let's see, from, I think, medicalnewstoday.com, just to try to do proper attribution here. Now, I'm going to set the stage with this by saying Mike and I have already discussed in the past quite a bit on how artificial sweeteners can cause some problems with your microbiome. What's interesting about this one is it's not just the pink stuff, right? It's not just the blue stuff or the yellow stuff. This is now stevia being added to the list. And when you think about it, it's not that odd, really, that you're getting these neural signals of intensely sweet tastes and everything. And then your blood sugar doesn't change. Your gut bacteria don't get the sugar that maybe they were expecting, if you will. And some, weird things happen. Maybe you can't have your cake and eat it too, but... So it says artificial sweeteners, right, or non-nutritive sweeteners have had increasing use, including stevia, which is a natural sweetener. There is, however, still some debate whether these alternatives are necessarily healthier than sugar. Now researchers from Ben Gurion University in Israel have found that stevia may cause a microbial imbalance in the gut. So they talk about stevia being derived from the leaves of Stevia rebaudiana, if I'm pronouncing that properly, from Brazil and Paraguay. It says between 200 and 300 times sweeter than sugar, it has practically no calories and thus is considered a healthy sweetener. I mean, imagine everybody avoiding carbs, right? So it says, however, the healthy part may not necessarily be the case. In this study, researchers investigated the effects of different strains of stevia on the gut microbiome. They looked at a commercially available stevia supplement, and in doing so, they found that while the sweetener did not kill off bacteria, it tended to inhibit certain microbial communication pathways. Meanwhile, in testing purified stevia extracts, they found that the sweetener may have interrupted gram-negative bacterial communication. So it's not killing off the helpful, right, diverse gut biome, and we've had whole episodes about this in the past. We've interviewed people about it in the past, but it could interrupt the way that they communicate with each other and arguably, I suppose, the rest of your body. So I don't know if there is at this point a great alternative, except just trying to like things that are less sickly sweet. We had Anthony Almada on, and I did a quick fire with him. I remember I said sugar or artificial sweeteners, and he just said sugar. I'd rather just have a little bit of sugar. Mike, what do you think about this? Anything about a gut microbiome and artificial sweeteners?
Yeah, I didn't read that study yet, but it sounds like it might be an in vitro study, but I'd have to look. So, like all studies, it depends on the amount and, what was the study set up and what did they do, and also what are you replacing. So if you're replacing 4 Mountain Dews with some stevia, it's probably better. I don't know. I think it also goes back to, we had Dr. Sarah Campbell on here, and
Sarah, right?
What is a normal gut microbiome? I don't doubt that there's going to be changes, but all sorts of stuff changes it. Travel changes it. What you consume changes it. So, in theory, you could, like you said, might be some miscommunication because your brain's saying, "Ooh, sweet stuff. Ooh, must be carbohydrates coming. Ooh, wait, no carbohydrates. What happened?"
Yeah,
but that doesn't guarantee it's going to be a negative either. So I generally don't get super worried about it. But if someone is sucking down like 8 cans of Tab a day, then they probably have other issues they need to worry about too.
Yeah. There was an episode, if anybody's interested, you can check out Science Friday. This was a couple of years ago. I think it was called Artificial Sweeteners Sour the Microbiome. And that's what they were talking about. In fact, that's one of the things that turned me on to a lot of this. And as Mike and I are also pointing out, there's that, and there's also a more system-wide issue with screwing with sort of neural communication between your gut and your pancreas and brain and hypothalamus and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I suppose the best answer is just try to not be so dependent on things that are grotesquely sweet. But like you, Mike, I'll have occasional diet pop, something like that. I don't remember the last time I drank full sugar pop, like cola or something like that. I don't drink a lot of it anyway. So, yeah, I mean, I still think damage control-wise, I'd rather have some slight miscommunication between the bacteria in my large intestine, than, I don't know, chug down 100 grams of high-fructose corn syrup.
Yeah, and usually for most of our audience, like, they're probably getting it in, possibly some pre-workouts and maybe protein powders and, the amount, like, if you look at sucralose, which, again, is different than stevia, the amount you use, even in just 40 grams of a protein powder, is super small too. So it's I've had not any current clients, but I've had a few clients in the past, like 5 years ago, who, one guy in particular, got in this big debate about there wasn't really any natural, quote unquote, protein products at that time unless you just got the raw powder without any flavoring. And so he was debating with that, because of all the other things, it's going to be bad for your gut and the artificial flavors and everything else. And I'm like, you're eating 40 grams of protein a day. Like, just if that's the thing, then, get some dead animals and cook them instead. But, yeah.
Yep. I don't know, Phil, what about at Strength Guild or the people who you work with? Do you run into artificial sweeteners a lot, or are you just not having people focus on that stuff, or how do you go about that?
I think the main thing we run into is some people, like Mike was saying, with their protein powders and things like that. But we don't have a ton of people, I think, that.
Yeah.
It's just, there's not a lot of soda being drank. A lot of water.
Right, as it should be.
Water's good.
I go through a lot of friggin' water, but because I supply the water. But I don't have to deal with a bunch of questions about that. I mean, everybody will have some here, but I don't know. I'm also dealing with generally a more mature population that's kind of been in this game a while, and so you kind of run through the gamut of the usual stuff that everybody goes through in their first 5 years.
Yeah.
As far as training and nutrition. So.
Yeah. I think with the popularity of keto diets and stuff, I can see people leaning a little heavier on some of the non-nutritive sweeteners and whatnot. But yeah, you can find fault with everything, ultimately. Mm-hmm. The reason I brought this up at all was because when I saw it, I'm like, well, add this one to the list, because I thought maybe this is the outlier, because I've heard that saccharin, the pink stuff, being the worst, aspartame also problematic. Sucralose, maybe. I had never heard anything about stevia. So now, literally, all of the most popular artificial sweeteners. I don't know about Ace K. I'd have to look into that a little bit, but which tastes kind of funny to me. But
yeah,
they've all got their
that
issues.
one they use in a lot of really heinous supplements because it's a pretty good flavor masker too.
All right, so that's a little something on artificial sweeteners for everybody. This next one, very different from my usual fare, but it just came out like December 29th of this year, so just happened. This is by Kevin Gretsch, it looks like, evolutionbodybuilding.net. It was just an interview with Lee Haney, so I thought I would look at this. 8-time Mr. Olympia Lee Haney, critical of the modern-day bodybuilder. In his latest interview with London Real, R-E-A-L, 8 times Mr. Olympia Lee Haney was very critical of the training and nutritional methods of modern-day bodybuilders. So I took a look at this, and it talks about his history and his first competitions and whatnot, how it was a different era. In fact, here's a quote. He says, it was during an era where there was very little information out there, Haney explained. During that time, the magazines mainly consisted of training and nutrition. It wasn't as commercialized as you see them now. Now, I think maybe he's romanticizing there. Let me give a little sidebar. Things were commercialized then, too. I learned a lot of what I know about nutrition, at least early stage stuff, from those same magazines. But they all degraded into an ad for a Weider product, or almost all of them. So it was really hard to tease those things apart. I think it was always commercialized. I would agree with him, though, 100%. And let's face it, I'm not a Mr. Olympia. So maybe my opinion doesn't matter. But at the time, there wasn't as many. Like, everything is so commoditized and commercialized now over the decades, that there's just a bigger mess. Although I will say that when you look at bodybuilding show sponsors and things like that, you don't see the huge list of quote-unquote nutrition companies, right, that used to be there. You do get a lot of the usual sponsors like Protan and Jantana and all these different kinds of products, but the era of bodybuilding sports supplements, I don't know if it's just diversified to such an extent that there are 1 million little guys in the market, but you just don't see the huge players that you used to all the time. There are companies like EAS that went mainstream and then bought up by Abbott, right? And then, I don't know, some companies just sort of died off, like Pinnacle. There are companies like Metrex, and I don't see them sponsoring bodybuilding as much as they used to. Though that heyday seems to have gone.
Yeah, I think they've realized that even going to the Arnold 2 years ago, like some of the biggest lines that I saw were for people I had no idea who they even were. It just seemed like it was, yeah, it's still focused on, fitness and bodybuilding, but it's much more of, I don't even want to say consumer crowd, I guess. It just seems like it's social media influencers and people who, can sell a lot of product, and that doesn't always necessarily mean they're one of the top athletes either.
Yeah. Well, and let's face it, I would argue that the social media influencers aren't always the people I'd be listening to either.
I'm not saying that's good.
Yeah, I hear you. In fact, the whole fact that there's a term, social media influencer, I do roll my eyes a little bit. But that's, I mean, I'm antisocial with that kind of stuff. But
we're just old farts.
Old farts. A couple of things more that about Lee Haney here. It says Lee's now passionate about pointing the younger generation in the right direction to teach them how to train in a way that won't destroy their bodies. Some professional athletes don't know when to quit, destroying their body, trying to stay on top. Lee believes it's best to take care of your body so you can have a future of good health. And then here's some quotes. We're finite creatures. We're not going to live forever, Haney said. If we can use what we accomplished over the span of our lifetime as a competitor to impact the life of other young athletes, other people, then man, what a thrill. And he goes on to say, but also letting them know too that this doesn't last forever, and that you need to do it in such a way that you don't destroy your physical body. At the end of the day, you still want to be functional. You want to enjoy your grandkids, as I am. So just quotes from Lee Haney there. Interestingly, he had made some comments about what guys look like now. And I thought this was interesting. He was saying that essentially back in the day, even through Dorian Yates, things were still proportioned physique-wise. Dorian was larger, for example, but his physique still had symmetry and balance and hardness. He says, that's what you don't see now, Haney added. You see guys, quote, with little calves and big thighs. You see a guy with huge shoulders but a narrow width, or a guy with high lats, because the ability and the tools and the knowledge to develop a complete physique are not there in the training principles that we adhered to growing up. Totally different. So that's really interesting, again, because Mike and I were just sort of lamenting about this, or maybe I was mostly, about guys are just, they're so massive. You slap enough mass on a human body and everything starts to look more similar than it used to, I guess. Yeah. They don't have that ridiculous hardness, at least not in the same way that they used to. I don't know. So it was interesting that Lee Haney, I feel like he's backing me up here a little bit because, another different generation guy talking about the modern era of bodybuilding. We did lose a subscriber after that discussion. I wondered if it was a bodybuilding passionate person who's like, oh, Lowry's just down on this and he doesn't understand all these classes and he's sort of critical of what's going on these days, and that's why he's not, following it as closely. Now, it could have been for a completely different reason. Right? I don't want to go down some fantastical path, but I do notice that kind of stuff, and I wonder, like, it's not that I hate bodybuilding. I love it. That's the whole thing is where has it gone? And I don't know. I don't have that level of minutia, fascination, I suppose that I used to when I look at the top competitors in the Mr. Olympia. I actually rather watch, I think where a lot of the action is at the national level, guys that are hungry to turn pro. That's to me, a lot of the fascinating stuff. But
yeah, I mean, I used to follow bodybuilding a lot more closely than what I have probably the last 5 years, at least at the elite or top level. But I mean, I remember seeing Dorian when he first came out. Was it Night of Champions? I can't even remember. And I was like, what the hell is that? And I'm like, okay, this is the apex. Like, no one's going beyond this. This is like going to stay forever. And then it's different now, but there's competitors now that make him look smaller, which is crazy.
Yeah. I think it was the Munich Pro Show. There's a YouTube video, And to this day, I watched that with Dorian, and I think this is what you just did, Mike. How can you surpass that? It is a freak show. I mean, he also had the separation and the hardness with that much size. Just monstrous. But, yeah, I don't know. Phil, do you have any thoughts? I know you're more in the powerlifting side of things. Do those guys even keep track of modern bodybuilding and stuff, or just not so much?
No, not so much at all. I mean, it's kind of just gone from where we used to be. I mean, there's not as many people following at all, as in my opinion. I know we've had people come on say that bodybuilding is as big as it ever was and this and that. I'm not buying it. It's just not. I mean, for God's sakes, there was a time where, like, Arnold made movies and stuff after becoming just a bodybuilder. Most people don't know who. If I went out and asked 500 people on the street today who won the Olympia, I would be amazed to get one answer me. So.
No, I understand what you're saying, for sure.
Even probably in a gym. Like, I could go to the local Crunch or whatever it is. I'm like, hey, guess who just won the Olympia? They wouldn't know. I mean, that's talking narrowing down the audience to people who are into fitness. So.
Right. Yeah.
I think at some point there's almost, unless you're into it as a sport, you just can't begin to even relate to it.
Yeah.
Which is crazy because strongman is much more popular now, which you could argue, I don't know how anyone can relate to picking up a 400-pound stone, but they know what a 400-pound stone is.
Yeah.
And they can look at it and go, yeah, that's hard, that's crazy. You know, they look at a competition now and they're like, that's just all crazy. I can't tell any difference between this crazy or that crazy.
Yeah. For me, it's just the lack of difference from body to body. There was short and tall, and the Tom Platz with the big legs, and somebody with a crazy back, or Arnold's freaky peak on his biceps, or there's all these different things. And yeah, now a lot of the guys, they just look so similar, and they're so massive. Yeah, they just don't have an element of sharpness, I guess. Maybe it's impossible when your muscles are that hypertrophied. And that's why when I say technology is in many ways ruined the sport, is we've escalated to a point, and I mean pharmaceutical technology, that there's the quest for size is over, kind of, because if you have unlimited access and the person telling you what to take, you can essentially be so massive you can barely function. Well, I don't know. Then that quest for size, and Mike and I were talking about this, but that's what's fun about I think a lot of the amateur stuff is they're limited in what they're willing to do or what they're able to obtain,
or afford,
and that's a limiter that still leaves the quest for size open. And so in doing so, they're still trying to be bigger and harder, but there's some variety in the physiques and that kind of stuff. So to me, it just becomes more interesting to watch. I don't know about, there's no doubt that someone like a Frank Zane is more attainable. The guy was like, 190s in shape. Obviously not one of the bigger guys, or even like Lee Labrada and guys like that. I'm not sure they were necessarily attainable, but they were. Those physiques are desirable, I guess. And I mean, the current top guys are all so massive. Yeah, I don't even know if it's actually even desirable. When I look at, to Phil, your point about I just don't buy it, because it's true. If you talk to the bodybuilding show promoters, they're like, listen, we have more entrants than ever before. It's more popular than ever. But like, I can tell you from like in an exercise science student body, any 4-year group, there's usually 1 or 2 physique interested people. And I think it was higher than that before. I mean, like, you're right about like when Stallone and Arnold are all over the action movies. Yeah. Bodybuilding was part of pop culture more, and now things are just more performance oriented, I guess. So,
yeah, and there's just not that many characters or differences. I mean, you go back a few decades, and you had Arnold, you had Franco, you had Zane, you had, competitors that looked completely different from one another, and now they all kind of look the same, which, yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to pick your favorite when everybody is. And, it's a lot of people would be like, that's unfair. These guys don't all look the same. Well, I would argue they look more similar to each other.
More similar.
Right, than in decades past. Yeah, because, again, they're just all so hypertrophied, wildly hypertrophied kind of thing. But so, yeah, I tend to agree with Lee Haney about this. Now, to be fair, though, like I said, maybe he's romanticizing the older era. I think things were always commercialized. I think that there were always differences, like somebody with higher lats or they didn't have calves or that kind of stuff. But if there's anything I think that irks me the most is that you get these guys with gigantic chests and shoulders, maybe arms, but they have non-existent calves. And to me, that's an incomplete physique. If I was a judge, I would not be putting those guys in the top spot. I mean, there's got to be some balance, I suppose. I'd like to get a judge on sometime because apparently there's new streamlined judging criteria and things like that, just to understand it a little bit better. Because even 10 years ago, God, it's been almost 10 years since I competed. That's hard to believe because I did it during the podcast. But
yeah.
But the high, throw out the high score and the low score, but even then there were a lot of judges. They just dig the style of your physique because again at the national qualifier level, I was never at the national level for God's sake, but there was differences, and if they like a balanced classic kind of physique, they might go for you. If there's somebody who's all about huge pecs and arms and they're willing to overlook weak calves, they might place that kind of person over you, in the lineup and kind of thing. But anyway, so interesting stuff from Lee there.
I do think he had a good point about people being able to successfully transition out of it, because I think that's still kind of a rarity. I mean, people have done it. Obviously, Arnold's done it. I mean, Dorian's done it to a pretty high degree. But they tend to be more the outliers, I'd say, and not necessarily the norm.
Yeah, so they don't walk away with like permanent kidney damage and all kinds of, heart damage.
Yeah, just look at how many people have unfortunately just passed away at a pretty young age too. Whether it's related or not related, at some point you can't help but think that it's got to be related somehow. So
yeah, well, I mean, when you're in your 40s and you're having multiple heart attacks,
yeah,
or, Phil, I know you've talked about this in the past, too. That's a similar mentality with some of the, I hate to say Instagram generation powerlifters, but they rather burn out than fade away, yeah. I think.
Oh, hugely, yes. Yeah. And I think a lot of that has to do with just social media. They are under pressure, like every day, to post a video of them doing something crazy.
and better.
Do that.
Yeah.
Instead of peaking for a meet a couple times a year, you're peaking for training every day. I got to put up something for the fans. No, you really don't.
No, you don't.
So it's okay. So
yeah, I hear you.
I had a funny thought related to that the other day. Like, can you imagine like Ed Cohn putting stuff on Instagram back in the day?
Yeah.
Like, here's another day me doing almost the same thing I've done for 10, 20 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In terms of his training, obviously he destroyed everyone on the platform. But if you watched his training, I imagine people nowadays would be like, that guy's so boring.
Yeah.
Well, they were about their own performance and careers, and any type of media coverage was not the point. That was a secondary thing. People watching them do what they do. Now the media, self-produced media, is the point.
Yep.
And, I don't know. That loses some of that sort of hardcore, blue-collar thing that always attracted me to some of this stuff. But
yeah, and your risk-reward just gets really skewed, like Phil was saying. That's probably why longevity isn't going to be super high when you're trying to do something to impress a bunch of people you don't know.
Yeah, isn't it funny? It's like one of those things, we should probably do an episode on things we wish we knew. We probably have done that before, but one of them is kind of what Lee is saying, is what you're saying, Mike, about transitioning back. I mean, a lot of the guys that I idolized, they're still alive. They're still lifting in their 80s and stuff like that, and functional, and they got away with it in a sense because they didn't abuse. I mean, I know that's a subjective word, but abuse anabolics to such an extreme degree and that kind of stuff. I mean, dabbling around with some DECA or, using something 12 weeks pre-season to get ready for a competition and then cycling off it. And I know people have different opinions on this stuff, but clearly some level of moderation before things escalated so badly, it led to that ability of these guys to actually age more gracefully, instead of being, dead before they're 45. Yeah. It's just a tough scenario. And I don't know, to be fair to the young guys, when you're young and hungry, you want to be brutal. You want to be huge. You want to do everything that's at your disposal, and it's
longevity usually isn't the top thing on your radar then either.
No. It's seductive, right, to become this superhero and have all this adulation. I mean, it's
easy to fall in that trap.
Yeah. All right, we're going to go to break. When we come back, we are going to talk about must-see locations, if you will, or events in 2021. Hopefully, things slowly start to normalize, but if not, done safely, of course. But we'll be back in just a bit.
I can't stop feeling. Some of us don't understand how lucky we are to be living in this land.
Hi listeners, this is Rob Fortress Fortney. I'm here to remind you that as the holiday season approaches and your thoughts turn to giving, we like you to keep Iron Radio in your thoughts.
Over the past several years, there have been hundreds of listener comments hoping that Iron Radio stays on the air for years to come. Iron Radio is here for you. But as with any public radio type format, the show is listener supported. That's where you come in. For just $4 a month, you become a supporting member, keeping your weekly dose of education, experts, and gym talk flowing. Just go to www.ironradio.org and click on the $4 monthly subscribe button near the bottom of the page.
Or click the donate button at the right of the page for a one-time donation. You are the Iron Brotherhood and Sisterhood.
Of course, not everyone can afford to be a supporting member or a significant one-time donor. But for those of you willing to pitch in, $4 per month or $50 just once, we're about to sweeten the deal. Become a supporting member or major donor between now and January, and a limited number of you will receive a gift worth over $20. And we will never forget our existing supporters. Simply email me via ironradio.org, and I'll send you a free seminar from Dr. Lowry on how to significantly and realistically boost your testosterone levels. Help your Iron brothers and sisters who cannot pitch in but deserve better internet programming in our sports. And happy holidays.
Iron Radio is, of course, primarily a podcast. But over the years, there have been technical glitches calling for backup streaming and listeners who wanted the convenience of other sources of audio content. For this end, Iron Radio is now simulcast and backed up on YouTube. If needed, please search Lawnman07 or Iron Radio from within YouTube. There's not much video, but if you like to listen through YouTube on a Roku or other living room device, there you go. Okay, listeners, after more than a decade of joining us on the podcast airwaves, you can now also become viewers on YouTube. This is not our usual simple backup of the audio show, but rather a growing body of video taste tests covering various foods of interest to nutrition enthusiasts, bodybuilders, and powerlifters. From within YouTube, simply search for Iron Radio Taste Test or Nutrition Radio Taste Test. In about 15 minutes, we cover taste and texture similar to other products, usefulness to the co-hosts, and whether we would recommend the product to certain clients. You may even want to watch our podcast feed or Facebook group for which products are coming down the pike so you can taste test them with us. Join us for this new monthly project.
Weekly fix of Iron Radio. In addition to being a popular institute on iTunes, we are also on email. Simply go to www.ironradio.org and sign up for the voluntary email. You'll get a once per week email, no more, That's little more than the show notes and a link to the audio. So go for it.
All right, everyone, we're back. It's Phil and Mike and Lonnie heading into 2021. So happy New Year, everybody. First show of the new year. We thought we would talk about must-see things in 2021. So these could be events or locations. I know this is sort of premature. We could be looking months down the road. We know a lot of events are delayed and that sort of thing. But, you know, these would be things that would sort of increase your awareness or educate you about the landscape, right, of all things Iron Radio interested, like, you know, muscle mass, strength, maybe sports nutrition, the desire for knowledge, right, to help improve you physically, all that kind of stuff. Phil, let's just start with you. What do you think about, you know, informational things or inspirational things that people could see in the coming year?
If and when it happens, I still think anybody should go see the Arnold. I mean, it's just such a spectacle. Like coming from somebody that started out with my big event first ever big event I ever went to was the Olympia, and then transitioning then to the Arnold and just what it is comparatively. If you're into anything fitness, it's there. So, I mean,
yeah,
literally anything, freaking pole dancing to cheerleading to, you know, strongman to, I mean, it's all under one roof. I know it's already been delayed from what I hear. I think they're talking May now. But
I saw that, yeah.
So, but yeah, if that happens, it's worth go see it. I mean, and not even just for the expo. I mean, the expo's neat, but I mean, that's not. I'll be honest with you. I spend as little time in the expo as I possibly can. So, just walk around there and see the people walking around. I mean, you'll see Arnold walking around. You'll see, you know, tons of people just walking around the audience. So
yeah, pros from the past and the present.
Yeah, just oddly enough, you'll run into, you know, you'll just walk past. Oh my God, that's so and so. So, go in, stop in the powerlifting, stop in the weightlifting, stop in the jiu-jitsu, stop in the, you know, see all this stuff. These people that have trained all year long for this. So there's tons to see under one roof. So
yeah, you know, the most fascinating thing for me, because that would be on my list too, of course, is the refocusing, not completely, of course, but to amateur stuff. You know, like there is an enormous amount of amateur bodybuilding, powerlifting, almost anything you can think of there, so broad. Whereas when I first went to the Arnold Classic, it was just called the Arnold Classic. It was just the bodybuilding show, like back in the days of Sean Ray and Rich Gasperi competing and everything. And the expo was just a couple of booths, you know, in the lower levels of the Veterans Auditorium there in Columbus. And God, just so radically different. And look at the growth that it has brought, right? When you start to include, you know, involvement of the amateurs and stuff like that. But
it's definitely an event. If people haven't gone to it, I agree with Phil. It's definitely worth seeing. I mean, just the amount of different athletes there. Here's a tip: if you go to the expo, don't go it on Saturday. It's so
impossible,
so nutty. I remember 3 years ago I had to do a presentation. I was there for the NSCA, and I was on the other side of the expo, and I had to get to the other end of the expo hall, and I gave myself 20 minutes to try to get through on a Saturday, and I barely made it. And I'm like trying to run through people. It's just shoulder to shoulder. But yeah, it's definitely worth seeing, even if you get there. My advice is get there early. You know, sometimes there's even seminars the day before the official thing starts. I went to one, was it 2 years ago, with John Meadows, Scott Stevens, and Serrano. That was super fun. I think it was like Thursday, the day before or something. So some other seminars, things like that. And yeah, probably stay out of the expo on Saturday.
Right. Now, Mike, in your experience, I think I gave a talk down there. I think it was for the Strength Pro or I forget.
Yeah, they used to do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, like years ago, and similar thing. But from your experience, can lay public attend all these seminars in these side rooms and different buildings and stuff? Or
yeah, that's what's crazy is like pretty much anyone can go. And a lot of times, like the one with John, I love those guys, but it was like dirt cheap. I want to say it was like less than $100 or $130 or something, for like a good, 8-hour seminar. It was great. So yeah, I think a lot of times they don't do a lot of publication of them because a lot of times it's in smaller rooms, and I'm sure they've got to pay a fair amount for, cover the room, the rent, and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, if you're on their mailing list or if you know about it, then I think it's probably going to be more and more because people are probably going to want to go to live events, assuming, all of that happens. And then also, like, we do podcasts, and it's a good way to meet a lot of people you haven't seen in a while. And like 2 years ago, we were there, and Saturday we left and just did a podcast with Ben Pekulski and hung out with him all day away from the expo because it was so crazy.
Mm-hmm.
But if you do other media stuff, it's, a great way to meet people because they're all going to be usually in the same area too. It's just trying to coordinate schedules gets kind of crazy. But yeah, and just to see the amount of people that show up for it, like the first time I went, to me, that was like impressive. Especially you kind of live in your own little world. You're like, I don't know if really that many people are into it. And you see like thousands of people everywhere that are into it at some level. That was actually kind of inspirational. I'm like,
it is.
There is still hope for fitness.
It is. You're right. Because, I mean, if you're really into, let's face it, still very niche sports like strength and bodybuilding, bringing thousands, tens of thousands of people together all at once into a community, you realize it's a secondary community. It might not be all local, and you never see these guys. Maybe once every couple of months you'll see somebody who's truly huge, walking around a town or something, the grocery store. But yeah, to have them all drawn in one place at the same time it can be sort of, I don't know, inspirational, I guess, or just mind-numbing that there's so much out there. I do think, though, that with coronavirus and everything, the Lorimer and those guys, all the people who put together that event, they're probably very spoiled about just the sheer amount of profit they can make by jamming stupid numbers of people, literally shoulder to shoulder in a room that big. And that can't happen in 2021. We're not going to see that. I mean, I can't imagine the super spreader kind of event from that, right? Where you're literally on top of, I don't know, tens of thousands of other people in the expo. I mean, so.
Yeah, it's my little indicator is still big concerts. When they figure that out, then the rest of the stuff is probably somewhat back to quote unquote normal.
Yeah. It's going to be a slow progression, I imagine.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, I think we probably all would include that in our top 5, if not top 3, as far as the Arnold thing. Phil, what else do you have? Physical locations or events or... Yeah, physical locations.
It's so probably novel, but I don't even know if that's the right word. But just nobody else is doing it. I'd say Mark Bell's Super Training Gym. Just because it's the only large gym like that I know of that is just 100% free. It's free. Like, come, you're supposed to put up the hours. You come, you sign a sheet, and you go train.
Amazing.
So,
yeah.
The powerlifting team will be there training and whatnot. Mark might be back there. Just whoever's there is there. There's certain hours, and you can just come train. And that's a really nice facility. Like, top-end nice. So, I mean, because Mark's done the bodybuilding thing, so for that, when he was training for the bodybuilding show, he bought a bunch of freaking equipment just for that. And then he has the powerlifting stuff, and then he has the, sleds and prowlers and blah, blah, blah. It's a large space, and you come in, sign a sheet. It's pretty much like sign your life away, where if you kill yourself, you're fine. But, yeah, I mean, that would be one. And just, Mark's Mark, man. He's a personality, and...
Yeah.
Like him or don't like him, you should meet him.
Yeah.
So, so I mean,
for the listeners, where are they located, Phil?
Sacramento. Yeah. So they're up in Sacramento, California. And if you just look it up, it's right there. Address is on there. It's like Super Training or Slingshot World Headquarters, Super Training Gym. And they've got the front room. They've got a room with this Slingshot store, and then behind there is the gym. And you can kind of go in there and you'll see his whole team working in different rooms on different stuff. And
everybody, from what I've seen, is always very cordial and nice and ready to meet you, and you can just go train. So I've trained there numerous times and had people just wander in, like, oh, you guys are back there training. You know, when I'd be training with the powerlifting team and whatnot, and people just watch, do their own thing.
Right. Now, do they ever just show up to be spectators, or do they all have enough self-respect to actually try to train?
Most of them will try and do something. You'll see some people that are just, you can tell they're there just to watch, and they kind of pick up a dumbbell and do some curls and just watch what's going on. But no, I think most people come and train. Yeah, I mean, at the level that they're capable, but I think a lot of them are just there for inspiration.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So, which is nothing wrong with it. But.
Yeah, the fact that it's free is so radically different from anything I've ever experienced. I remember being at Venice Beach, and they wanted like $25 for me to train once, out at Gold's there. Yeah. And I'm like, well, okay, because for the same reasons that you did. Like, I'm literally on a machine next to pro bodybuilders that I recognized from the magazine. I was like walking among the deities, And it really, to your point, it depends on who's coming and going and that kind of stuff. We'd go down the street and eat at the Firehouse Cafe, and there's Gary Stridham eating a whole freaking turkey and a bucket of vegetables, stuff like that. It was the experience. That was like the guy who I was up there with at the time. I drove up from when I was in San Diego, and he's like, "This is ground zero, baby," And it's true, but you also get some of the raw aspects of it too.
I came from Minnesota. I think it was in the winter, and it was ungodly hot and humid in there, and I felt like I was just dying from the from the heat. But it was super cool to see. It's definitely one of those places. I think if people haven't been there, it's definitely worth going to see just from the history alone.
Yeah. But to do something similar on the powerlifting side, and there's no cost. Kudos to Mark and those guys. Wow.
Yeah.
So,
Mike, what about you as far as a number 2 must-see event or location?
I would say I have a couple ones in terms of gyms. Like, I went to Iceland last year, and there's a place there called World Class Fitness, and it's supposedly the biggest gym in Europe. And by having lifted there, I would say it's probably true. The amount of just treadmills they have is crazy, and then they've got a whole outdoor area for CrossFit. They had an outdoor area for strongman. They had just different sections of the gym. They had, I don't know how many power racks just in one section with a row of dumbbells. Then they had more equipment in the middle. Then they had a whole another row of dumbbells in another area, and then a whole separate CrossFit area, and then a couple other studios and a downstairs. And yeah, I spent like just 2 hours in there just kind of training and wandering around from one machine to the next. So yeah, if you get the chance to go there, it's definitely worth seeing. Another one too that I was lucky to teach one of the carry courses there was in Helsingborg, Sweden. It was F&F Athletic Center. So shout out to Tobias who runs it. Super cool place. It's this mix of, they had tons of rowers, they had tons of open turf space for training athletes. They had a whole CrossFit section, and then they've got a lot of super old school, unique bodybuilding type equipment too, like stuff you probably haven't seen in a lot of other places. They've got even a full staff there. They've got cryo. I think they've got at least a chiro on site, and just awesome dude who runs it. Super great place. Everyone was super nice, and it's probably one of those places you may not have heard of, but if you're into any type of strongman or bodybuilding or anything, I'd definitely recommend to check it out if you're in the area.
Sweet. Yeah, gym-wise, I always liked the hole-in-the-wall kind of gyms, that were grungier, like those gems that you can find, and sometimes just surfing around the web and finding people who you admire at a national or pro level and just see where they train, and then you just go show up. Sometimes you'll hit a dud that way. But sometimes really not. As far as a gym location, I'm always going to be a fan of Strong and Shapely Gym there in Jersey and what they do there. They've had all kinds of media coverage over the years and that kind of stuff. Bob Bonham's a cool guy, stuff like that. But actually, number 2 on my list would be if you want to go see a bodybuilding event that is this sort of national qualifier, almost national level kind of thing, there are some bigger events that I've been exposed to over the years that are still going on. The Midwest NPC is a giant show. I've competed in that one myself. It's still going on. You can find it. I just Google NPC Midwest bodybuilding, and you'll be able to find this. But hundreds and hundreds of people in a crowd, probably over 1,000 people. And again, once things are safe, I don't know how they're going to do a lot of this stuff. I think it's stupid to put 1,000 people in a room together at the current time. But you'll get a good taste for higher end bodybuilding stuff at the amateur level. They're still doing the Northern Mr. Midwest USA or NPC up in Fargo, the Northern or Upper Midwest. That one's pretty cool. If you go to Bev Francis's gym, obviously a former real high-end professional IFBB pro female bodybuilder, but Bev Francis's gym has a nice list of sort of the Northeast and Atlantic shows that go on. Going to one of the larger events, as long as you're willing to sit through class after class after class of different weights and heights and slight nuances in whether it's wellness versus physique kind of thing or whatever it might be. Maybe you just kind of keep a tab on things and say, listen, I'd like to go start watching. If you're just interested in the bodybuilding stuff, maybe you wait for the middle weights or heavier. Or maybe you like the light weights. Maybe you're scoping out the competition, for the next year. I've always thought that was a fun way to go to a bodybuilding show, is for inspiration, and then you get an idea, like, I think I could take that guy, or, oh my God, those guys are out of my class, or, whatever it might be, out of my league, if you will. So there are some big ones. John Lindsay does good stuff, a lot of like bodybuilding stuff, like in San Diego, Southern California. I think those are still going on. So, yeah, seeing a high-end amateur bodybuilding show can light your fire a little bit too, I would think. So those are just some suggestions, I guess. Yeah. What else? Phil, do you have a third?
God, I mean, the tough one is, it's kind of like you were alluding to. It would be a meet. It would be something like Record Breakers or something like that. Record Breakers was always my favorite because it was a 2-day mixture of like the best in the world and regular ass people. Yeah. So, I mean, it was great for people that were just starting out, and like you could share the platform with frickin' Dan Bell. It's your first meet ever. But it's so hard right now because we don't know what's going to happen.
I know.
So it's like I had a hell of a time even finding a meet. So I'm signed up for a meet in March, and it was, I've been looking for one since normally I do one in November. So I can't even tell you one right now. I mean, it would be some event like that, where you get a nice mix, but I can't even point you to one right now until things just level out.
Not with a date, I know.
I just can't give a date.
The Arnold amateur bodybuilding stuff I was just looking at recently, and originally it was like March 4th or something like that, and it basically just says to be announced, like delayed TBA, and you're like, how, if you're planning your competitive schedule for the next year, how do you do that with a 20-week diet ahead of you, and you don't know what your deadline is? You need a date to count down to.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So, yeah, that's the tough part, but some big event. You guys can all come see me lift March 13th. It'll be amazing.
There it is.
Yeah. So, Texas. In Texas, the Texas Powerlifting State Championship, March 13th, in I don't even know where it's at, outside of San Antonio. So
okay, well, yeah,
nice.
I always like the central stuff. The reason I brought up the Midwest stuff mostly is because whether you're East Coast or you're more West, it's in the middle. You can road trip it if you had to.
This will be my first ever equipped meet, so I'm going single play. So should be interesting.
Yes, it should. Wow.
I got my third session in the bench shirt. I just hate it. But we'll see. It's like, oh God, it sucks. It's bad. But the suit I'm fine with. It feels great. But the shirt just sucks.
So
Yeah.
I got a lot to learn in that. But
right on.
So
Mike, what about you?
I would say as events, I know you're going to probably say this too, Lonnie, the ISSN event, if it still happens. So International Society of Sports Nutrition down in Florida in June again. I didn't go this past September, but hopefully it still happens. We'll kind of have to wait and see. I know they've got a webinar coming up in February or March also. And then, caveat, if it happens too, the CrossFit Games, although I know they've changed the format, they have a new CEO, and they added some quarterfinals and some other stuff now, but we've gone to that a couple times in the past in Madison, Wisconsin, and that's always been super fun. We didn't pay for the tickets to see the fancy Coliseum stuff inside, but yeah, just watching all the other competitors and then being outside, and yeah, it was a very well run event. A bunch of people we knew usually show up there, and so I'd say that might be one to add to the list also.
All right, yeah, you're right. I would also say the ISSN. I think if you like the nutrition side and supplements and whatnot, you're going to see some world famous researchers, but you're also going to see a ton of jacked and ripped bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts and that kind of stuff. It's got a real resistance training flavor to it. It looks like it's June 17th to 19th this year. Let's see, St. Petersburg, Florida. I'm just looking at it right now. So 18th annual.
My favorite memory from ISSN was frickin' Darren Wilby, the most jacked professional I've ever seen in my life. That dude is frickin' huge.
Yes, he is. Like pro level, huge and jacked.
Yeah. Up there with his PhD, just spewing knowledge and just jacked.
Right.
So
talking biochemistry, yeah.
Yep.
It's funny. So. No, but yeah, I agree. That's a good one too. Well, that, and again, yeah, even these events, that's the only one that I know of, even on the geek side, that hasn't gone virtual or been delayed a year or something like that. We were talking about this a few weeks ago, but and I don't know where that's even headed. We're just going to have to pan out, even with vaccines, and I'm actually hoping to be in the second wave here in Ohio. Teachers are going to get them, but even with that, I'm not so naive as to think that everybody's just going to pile into, stadiums then and that kind of stuff. There's going to be a slow transition, I think, back to something more like normal. But, the ISSN one is the one I really got my eye on. I would like to actually, even though I had to road trip it, just drive down there with a handful of students and present some coffee research and stuff. Just because it's not virtual. I did the virtual thing this past year, and although it was a high-quality event with some really notable people speaking, I'm just a little bit less enthusiastic when there's no expo at all, and you don't get to sit in a room and learn from someone and see them and that kind of stuff. To me, it's a little less of a draw. So I'm really hoping the ISSN one sticks around. Definitely worthwhile for listeners.
And plus, you just get all the side conversations in between the talks and in the evening, and you get to see, if you've been around, you get to see tons of people you probably don't see any other time in the year. And if you're new to it, you get to meet a lot of people you've probably read their research and at least know who they are.
Oh, yeah. You're right. Walk around the posters, hundreds of posters and socials where there's free grub and or open bar kind of thing, and that kind of stuff can be really worth it just in itself. Yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll see. These gyms are in place, right? Some of these events. I mean, Phil's got one, so these events are in place. As far as I could tell, the bigger bodybuilding ones, they're still a go. Whether you agree with that or not, send us an email and we can talk about it, I guess. But they're going to have to be modified in some way, that's for sure. So, anyway. All right, well, that's going to be it for this week. So, thanks, guys.
Until next week.
See you.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.